Hello, everyone. So we're here now for the Capital Markets panel. We have three esteemed panelists: Christy Maclear, who is coming from more of a creative background and has been pushing the boundaries in the creative space as well as the investment space. And then David Namdar and Jehan Chu. David is in New York, Christy in Aspen, and I think Jehan is in Singapore or Hong Kong. So also a pretty global panel here. And David and Jehan have been blockchain investors for the past, I think 7 years for both of them. So pretty long career in the industry. Excited to have you all here. Let's just start with introductions so the audience can get to know you all a bit. Christy, maybe let's start with you.
Christy Maclear. I'm the CEO of Artist Digital Ventures, and I've been a startup CEO for a number of organizations, from Superblue, which just opened in Miami, an immersive art experience, to the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation and the Philip Johnson Glass House. But I've been involved, I think we're in a place right now where I've been involved in a lot of infrastructure builds. So moving roadways in the city of Chicago or building a new digital city for Disney. So nice to be here. Pleasure.
Thank you, Christy. And I've got to say, I just put it together that Superblue is with Therm Art, right?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. I just heard about that last week in Dubai. That's a small world thing to happen right now. Super cool. That looks like a really exciting project. And David, you mind also sharing a background?
Of course. So David Namdar, I am a partner at a hedge fund, Coral Capital, and also the president of a company, Immutable Holdings, of which NFT.com is one of the subsidiaries. And I'm also a partner at Brock Pierce's family office, Percival Ventures. I've been kind of coming from a hedge fund and banking background. I left in 2014 to start my first company in the crypto space, SolidX Partners. And there I went into Mike Novogratz' family office to manage all of his digital assets and started laying the kind of seeds for us to launch a business and a hedge fund together. That became what's known as Galaxy Digital, which we took public in Canada in 2018. In terms of the NFT space, I had helped start one of the first NFT projects back in 2017 called Block Party, now known as NFT Protocol, and then had been investing in a number of the other early projects back then, including Atomic, Block V, and a number of others.
Awesome. And Jehan?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Jehan Chu, I'm the managing partner and founder of Kenetic. We are one of the earliest and most active blockchain investors in Asia. I started off as a front-end developer with a startup in New York, and then I was with Sotheby's in New York, helped launch .com for a number of years before they moved me out to Hong Kong, and I was the head of client development in Hong Kong for a number of years before I became an art dealer. So I was an art advisor for about 8 years and during that time we got into crypto and started Kenetic in 2016. So we've invested in over 180, 190 companies, ranging from, Parity and BlockFi in the seed rounds to Decentraland, which brings me to NFTs. We started investing in NFTs and Decentraland back in 2018 or so, and we hosted the first global conference on NFTs called Nifty back in 2018. And since then, we've been somewhat more actively involved recently. I'm an active collector in NFTs ranging from Beeple to Rafiq Anadol to recently the Warhol sale, and also investor in a number of NFT platforms, including Eterna, Doing Good, Immutable X, Yellow Heart, and a number of others that are in stealth. So yeah, actively involved.
Super cool. I've got to say I'm familiar with the Kenetic story, but I had no idea that your background also included art and that you had this much exposure to NFTs. That's quite interesting. So awesome, great, diversity of backgrounds here. I think let's go back to the beginning for a second, and I'd love to hear all of your perspectives on what encouraged all of you? What inspired you guys to take more of a look into NFTs and not just overlook it as dumb kitty collectibles on the blockchain that are clogging the network? What inspired you that there was actually some real opportunities here? Maybe let's go the opposite way. So Jehan, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I invested in Decentraland, and that was kind of our entrance because we live in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's a real estate town, and so it was funny when we actually invested in Decentraland because with Decentraland you're buying NFTs, virtual land, and we actually went through the process of analyzing the map of Decentraland, trying to figure out from a real estate perspective which would be the most advantageous plots of land to buy based on real estate investment theory. So it was kind of interesting even back then to kind of combine real world disciplines with metaverse and NFTs. I think my thesis on NFTs and really digital assets in general, and especially things like domains and like Handshake is I think that NFTs are the kind of link between online and offline. Digital twins are very important. And I gave a talk, I think back in 2018 as well, I think called NFTs in the Real World, where, we kind of envision a world where things are kind of digitally twinned and kind of matching each other. And there's almost like kind of no border between what's physical, what's digital, and digital objects being represented in the physical world and vice versa. So I think we start to kind of expand our notion of like what is physical and digital reality with NFTs. And it's really kind of a quite important technology, which goes way beyond, art and content and design. And we just recently are invested in a company still in stealth, which is, looking at NFTs from a data perspective. So I actually think that enterprise NFTs, IoT NFTs are really going to be much larger than kind of what we are currently seeing in art.
Thanks, Jehan. Just before we move on, I'd love if you could provide a little bit more context. And you were talking about Decentraland Lands, the NFT part of Decentraland. Also, there's the wearable and the name part of Decentraland. But you mentioned that you decided to, through Kenetic or personally, invest into the land, the NFT, perhaps in addition to the mana currency, but I think it would be interesting for you to provide a perspective on why you chose land, if you also, and because I know that you're also invested into the fungible side of the market, but if you could provide some context into the different thought process behind the land NFT component versus the fungible mana component.
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of regret spending all of our money on the land because the mana went up so much that, we kept some of it back, but we spent, I think, maybe 75% of our mana in the initial auction, and just almost maxed out as much as we could, simply because, the land was more scarce than the mana. That was the basic idea. And, we really had no idea what value the land would hold. But I'm a Snow Crash kid, so I just always loved the idea of this kind of like metaverse, and this is a way to participate in it. So it's a very basic, kind of straightforward thesis that the land would be worth a lot, and the mana, you could always get it again, but the land, once it's gone, it's kind of gone.
Very cool. Yeah, my perspective too. Land is just more scarce, and although mana might appreciate faster, you can buy mana with $1. There's only a fixed amount of land, and it will become very difficult to acquire land in my humble perspective as the game grows. David, banking, finance, hedge fund background. How did you get inspired by NFT collectibles?
Sure. So, and to me, it's just, to be clear, it's not just the collectibles. It's really how expansive NFTs are, and how I view it. And I get inspired is actually one of the first things in the last couple of years that I've been looking for things to be excited about. It's been nice to kind of think back, like the NFT space right now. It reminds me a little bit about like the 17-18 hype cycle and peak enthusiasm and exuberance we saw around ICOs. But what really excites me is all the elements of it today that remind me of the period of 2012 to 2014 when I first got into the space, where there's still so much unknown that we're thinking up and dreaming. All of the crypto projects, in different sectors we have today, people had thought up back then, but the market wasn't ready for it. We used to bring up the example that there were a lot of things that, compared to the internet, when the internet was 3 million users and 30 million and 300 million users throughout the 90s, there were a lot of the biggest social networks and other things that didn't work, that it took another 10 years for them to work. We saw the same thing playing out in crypto, that there are a lot of ideas that didn't work when the crypto market only had 3 million, 30 million users. And today, who knows how many users we have, 50, 100, a couple hundred, depending upon how we measure it. And so, I think back when we first started talking to, when you mentioned CryptoKitties, what really stuck out to me early is like when systems, especially new systems, break or are pushed to their limits, that there's something interesting or exciting to dive deeper on. So when ICOs were first taking off in 2017, we saw a couple of the bigger ICOs like Bancor really push Ethereum to its limits. And it was the first time we were seeing, and also the Brave ICO, where people were trying to game the system and jam it and do different things and paying incredibly exorbitant Ether fees transaction fees in order to get into those ICOs. And then a couple months later, CryptoKitties had the same effect. And so it was something just to show as one of the first commercial applications or consumer applications, just how widespread it could be, but that the system, Ethereum, that it was happening on wasn't really built to scale and ready to handle all that interest and demand. So my point is like, when you see things like that happen, there's something to dive deeper into. And then for now, what excites me is, we're really still figuring out valuation, understanding the importance, the cultural significance. So it takes all of these different schools of thought, coming from the art world, coming from economics, coming from law and regulation, and trying to figure out how all of this applies. And we're both kind of thinking about what could happen and should happen, and then kind of dreaming up how all of these systems in the future could work and how we can interact with NFTs in different aspects of our lives. And so to tie it into, Jehan's example of Decentraland, right there, one of the things I think about is like, all right, we have the currency that's native to this whole digital world, but then everything else that exists in that, the land, or if you have some casino and you have membership or tickets or access or a concert hall or anything else inside that world, those are all represented by NFTs. So it's much broader than just currency being used for transactional purposes.
Thanks, David. I like that you kind of threw away the notion of NFT collectibles, which is really just the tip of the iceberg. I said that kind of jokingly because the whole NFT market started as goofy crypto kitty collectibles, and obviously has grown into everything non-fungible, whether that's real estate, cars, watches, art, music, being on the blockchain, and we're way past that goofy collectible side, which still has tremendous value. There is definitely a demand for goofy collectibles.
Michael, I'd like to throw in that I think Bitcoin is just a goofy collectible until it gets to like $1 million or more.
Well said. I mean, I think the fungible part of Bitcoin will make it transactable to buy coffee at Starbucks. In theory, if the transaction fees are not more expensive than the coffee itself, but one thing at a time. But yeah, I would agree that Bitcoin is kind of a goofy collectible. Christy, from your perspective as a leader in the art and art collector investor world, that you're really pushing the boundaries with taking NFTs into the art world, both through your experience at Sotheby's, but also with creating some of the next generation art galleries focused, or no, I wouldn't say focused, but with a big NFT component. How did you get into NFTs and start to take it seriously?
I have two stories about my entry and my interest in this area. And the first actually came about 15 years ago when we were starting up the Rauschenberg Foundation. And this is a great sort of art world history. Jehan, you'll know this story, which is in 1973, Bob Rauschenberg went to what was considered sort of one of the very first public auctions, where it was less about the galleries buying the work, but it went more into the public sphere. And so this auction, called the Skull Auction, this taxi cab company owner had this enormous collection of artworks, mostly made by living artists, and he sold the work. And Robert Rauschenberg was a little drunk, and he went up to Skull and he sort of got right in his face and he said, "You just made money on my back, and I'm not making any more money off of what you made." And in every other creative industry, there's a resale royalty. You know, there's like the ability to make money as the song gets reused or used in a different forum. But for artists, that was not the case. So Bob actually became a fierce advocate for something called resale royalties. And it was the invention of the Artists' Rights Society and all these sort of copyright laden organizations, which now look like, you know, the Flintstones, really, fundamentally. But I think this is the artist speaking through what the power is here of when an artist and a creative person, the content creator, participates in an NFT, there's a resale royalty. They actually participate in the ongoing revenue stream of this asset. So, you know, when you look at this market, that is one of the huge levers that's going to grow this marketplace, is that the artists are incentivized and they're actually in a leadership position to participate in this market. There are very few gatekeepers, and it removes a lot of those gatekeepers that creates that ongoing incentive for them. So that was my first story. And I love that story because everybody in the very traditional art world knows that story. And it's where these two worlds meet. And the second way I was introduced to NFTs and blockchain particularly is my time at Superblue, when we were creating immersive art experiences. So we're using artists that deal with technology. So Team Lab is just opened up in Miami. And my next phase after we gave the CEO-ship to the co-founder, I started doing the strategic planning for our digital foray. So where could a digital immersive art experience exist? And it really led me into a lot of the metaverse type of activities. And so it became very clear that whether it's fungible or non-fungible, there was a huge opportunity between gaming and the art world and how these two things started to coexist. So I actually look at artists as content creators because there's so much blurring in the cultural world between musicians and artists. So I actually just sort of consider them creators. And I think it's one of the major forces that's going to create the infrastructure for this investment field, really.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. So I think that there's a ton of additional value, some of which you identified from the creator side. I think it'd be interesting for us to now shift the conversation to how we're seeing, and you know, we're all pretty deep in NFTs ourselves. But Christy, from your experience dealing with some of the biggest traditional art collectors in the world, and David and Jehan, your experience dealing with traditional asset managers and you know, hedge funds, investors, whatever. Starting with Christy, from how are you seeing the current NFT market from the collector side? Are they understanding the value proposition? Is it slower to pick up? I wonder how what kind of conversations you're having and how you see the other side of the table.
So I actually see the collector forums being two separate groups of people fundamentally right now. And I actually think there's an interest for these two investor communities to come together. I think that the traditional art collector community is still very curious about what's happening. They're wondering if it's a manifestation of, you know, cryptocurrency and creating market markers for cryptocurrency. But I think as they're seeing these more transparent platforms And as much as they can, as much as we can ease entry into these tools and use nomenclature that's really clear. And I think that some of these nice curated forums, so Super Rare or Nifty Gateway, where the presentation is really creates community, introduces the artist, allows you to understand what every collector's portfolio looks like. That resembles the art industry collector base. So there is a community in that collector base that they want to find in this new, digital industry. And I think that there's what's very exciting is that the marketplace of collectors is exponentially grown. So now once we can actually hybridize these two consumer bases, it'll be really powerful.
Thanks, Christy. And David, back to you. I wonder how you're obviously very, very deep and seems like you've drank the Kool-Aid. How are the conversations you're having with more traditional asset managers, hedge funds? Are they seeing the big vision, or what are your thoughts?
So I think not quite yet. One of the unfortunate things that happens whenever the overall crypto market has some is doing well or has some, then they get attracted to traditional institutional investors. They like to chase. So they chase whatever's worked, whatever's getting hot. And so whether that's, as we look at the NFT space particularly, they're looking at some of the specific pieces of art or other forms of digital media. They're looking into the companies behind them. They're looking into trying to make bets and investments into some of the underlying blockchains that are claiming to have more of a kind of stronger positioning within the NFT space. But really, that's why I said, to my comment earlier, that reminds me of this 2012 to 14 period, that a lot of them don't understand and don't see the broader potential and haven't even started applying their brain power to it. So that's why what I like to do really is just plant the seeds, help kind of reframe people's perspectives, expand it a bit, let them know that it's not just about this one hype thing. Like everybody in the world now has heard about the Beeple sale and every day is. And so, that they hear this and it both causes them to want to rush into the space and start buying some art because they think they'll be able to sell it for higher, that everything's going to sell for these crazy numbers. And I'm trying to push them to understand why something like that, understand the reasoning why Meta Kovan purchased it and what his thesis is behind it, and then to get a little deeper and understand the different theses that people are applying to other forms of NFTs. And so, to what Jehan had said before about why applying certain real estate metrics plus all of his knowledge about kind of the cryptocurrency and ecosystems that have developed into the decentraland land purchases. And so you kind of need to take, and that's what I try to do with a lot of them, is help them with understanding how you need to apply all of these different kind of schools of thought and both types of valuation analysis, but also kind of with new of tech investing and understanding of systems in order to really see where this is going.
Indeed. David, you made an interesting point that I think would have value for us to go a bit deeper on, and we'll go back to Jehan and Christy on this as well. I think their perspectives would also add value. But you mentioned that this seems kind of like 2012, 2014, which I agree with, when there were a relatively small number, especially to today, new digital assets that were coming to market with arbitrary usefulness. Most didn't work out, and the broader crypto community at that time was very Bitcoin maximalist. Many people didn't consider the the value in having alternative blockchains for anything and everything. And now with NFTs, similarly, we have a number of NFTs that are coming to market. Many of which are just scratching the tip of the iceberg in terms of usefulness and haven't really actually integrated, I think, the principles that, and you identified as well, that make NFTs perhaps valuable. So I'd love for you to go a bit deeper into your thoughts on what might actually make an NFT valuable, or more valuable, and that it might maintain and perhaps increase its value over time.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's a number of different ways to take it. One of them, just thought that comes to mind now, is a friend of mine who goes by the Twitter handle Gmoney NFT. He put out a really good kind of rationale on why CryptoPunks have value, and framing that from very early on. And so, you know, when and some of the thoughts he shares there align with how I see kind of the value for some areas and aspects of NFTs. And so, you know, with a lot of art, right, I was explaining this to somebody last night, out of the 100% of art that exists today, 95 to 99% of that has no value. And what I mean by that is it's bought to be enjoyed. It's bought, you know, by somebody maybe for a number of different reasons, but it will never be resold for any significant value. Now, some small percentage of art, it could be 0.1%, it could be 1%, it could be 5 or 10%, is bought at a certain price, and it has value or grows in value or can over time. And now, what are the reasons why that happens? It can be because of the cultural or historical significance. It can be because the artist, you know, grows in stature over time or recognition, hopefully during their lifetime, sometimes after their lifetime. And so there's a number of reasons, going back to the historical context, of why art has had value, and also appreciating the effort and materials and other stuff that goes into it. And also the novelty of different forms of art based on the cultural zeitgeist of where we are at a point in history. And so that's where, when you look at certain crypto kitties and CryptoPunks, you know, to me, if I think ahead now, fast forward, I don't know, 20 years, 100 years, 200 years, right? If we're still communicating in this form, and you know, we're not kind of too far along with merging with robots and AI, right? There could be some historical significance placed on owning some piece of these first versions of NFT-related, crypto-related NFT artwork. And so I can see the long-term case of this the same way we look back on, you know, art in historical sense through each generation in different kind of cultural shifts. And so now, to get more into specifics on the value, that some of this also has to do with the fact that, like, the mechanism with which people are purchasing and participating in this has, you know, some of the art, traditional art sellers and locations like Sotheby's and Christie's are now getting into it. But the vast majority of this has been happening through new platforms and facilitated through cryptocurrency. So it's a lot of people that are using appreciated cryptocurrency, new value that has been created or attained over short periods of time, that is now being put into other some of these things. And so when you have that, it's tough to say, right, what the real value is for any of this, because it's valuable what someone's willing to pay for it today. You know, depending upon how the world plays out over the next 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, and how you know, there's a lot of other economic factors globally that'll you know, in terms of debasement of currencies, that will affect what the future value of a lot of this stuff is.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And Jehan, I wonder, back to we're all deep in this market. Yeah. Not everyone is, especially more traditional investors. I wonder the types of conversations you're having, and if people are understanding the big picture, or still think that we're at a goofy collectible stage.
Well, so I mean, this used to be my job, right, full time. Like, I would work with, you know, young collectors or kind of people who were new, mostly finance types, and try to help them understand, like, what is the intrinsic value of art? You know, like, so this is not a new conversation to try and help them understand what is the intrinsic value of kind of crypto, because so much of it is based on belief and passion and faith, especially in the absence of utility, which, you know, to be fair, a lot of the crypto projects are, and NFTs as well. There's no utility. It's about, you know, how you subscribe, how you invest value into it and receive value from it, based on your belief in the work. So to keep it simple, there's nothing that different here that we haven't seen in the last, like, 5 emerging art cycles. We saw the exact same thing in Chinese contemporary art boom back in 2006, 2008, where the market was like led by, well, the curation was led by the market. So the auction houses actually dictated what was important and critical because there just wasn't the infrastructure around Chinese contemporary art at that time. And so people were buying with their ears. We're seeing that same thing happen with NFTs, where it's like people are, literally aping into stuff because they hear that it's cool. And they see that, number go up, and that's cool too, because you're making money. What we're not seeing as much of as real kind of belief and faith in the underlying, value of the content in a way. I get that some of these collectibles are cool, and some of them are historical. Like I think CryptoPunks, even though I'm not into them, I acknowledge that they're historical and they mean something and they signify a particular value system and totem to crypto people. So it's culture, and you collect locally. So new collectors always collect local, and that's what you're seeing. But there's too much of it, right? There's no way that all this art will survive, and Namdar was saying, like a lot of it will fall out. Same thing happened with Chinese contemporary art. So what I'm doing on my side is I'm working with some of the top artists in the space, NFT artists, but I'm also working with some of the top galleries and some of the, I'm the crypto advisor to Christie's. So I'm trying to work on all different areas and also, talking with some of the top, not-for-profit institutions and just trying to bring everybody together from different angles. So, we're seeing it happen, right? The kind of the emergence of quality, what I think of as quality. And I think a lot of the art world would agree, like Urs Fischer. Like Urs Fischer is a very important contemporary artist, very well established, very well recognized, very celebrated, and he's dropping like legit beautiful NFTs. We're going to see more of that, right? Takashi was on the verge of dropping. Damien is dropping. Like there are really great artists that are coming into the space, and that's great. There are NFT artists who I think are really considering, what does my practice mean? And how does it fit into the canon or not of fine art? And it might not, and that's fine. But I think that the artists who will, the NFT artists who will kind of form, who will join art history, will be the ones who are assimilated and are accepted and are also kind of contributing something to the fine art discourse. And I think absent of that, it's just kind of, rich crypto people buying things which are their culture, which is fine. It's just not art history. And that's also okay. Like there's something else here, which is collectibles, and that's also okay, right? People collect a lot of stuff. So I think it's happening. It just takes time, and I think people need to be patient, but I think people also need to realize that a lot of people are going to get hurt when the bottom drops out, and a lot of these things kind of go to zero, and it's not new. It happens every art cycle.
Thanks, Jehan. Christy, Jehan had mentioned a lot about the history of art and how this is just the next iteration of art. You're sitting very much in the front seat of this boom. What are your thoughts there, and how are artists pushing the boundaries to ensure that their NFTs will provide increase in value, and what usefulness are they baking in?
So there are a couple things when I think about, I would like to look at it as an ecosystem versus like piece by piece, one artist production. And my thought is that NFTs really are about authentication, capturing an artifact, and then unique artworks. And so I might relate it to MapQuest wasn't actually functional until all the data was input into the system. And then we could use it, and everybody was able to use MapQuest, and maps were then obsolete. And we're in a place where, if you go retrospectively, the idea of authentication, this is where all artists and all estates should be putting all of their artwork on blockchain. Like that is seeding the system, and that's creating the baseline data for the infrastructure. And then the second is these artifacts. This is the collectible market, and the idea that the first Twitter feed goes out, that's an artifact. That we take some article or an object or an image, and those things become artifacts, and it becomes data into the system. And then the artists are using this forum both as a new economic engine and as a way in which the digital palette becomes introduced into our broader nomenclature of artwork. What is artwork? Digital artwork's been around for a long time. Bill Viola, Namjoon Pike. These are artists that are like, they're the precedents of what's happening now. And I think that it's opening up a whole new field of creativity. Like Jehan said, every time a new palette opens up, there's 1,000 people on the field, and 50 rise to the top because it's an extraordinary idea. And that is the principle of the best art, where it transforms your mindset and it makes you understand the world in a different way, or it captures civilization and culture as we understand it now. So I look at it like we have to seed the field, and we have to give rise and tools for people to invest in this. I have to say, there's the gallery, Transfer Gallery. It's a traditional gallery that's migrated very quickly in this digital world, and they just had a NFT gallery show. And when you put the artists in charge of something, they will transform it even more than the technologists and the engineers. And, if you put them together like they do at the new museum, it accelerates even more. So they're looking at the art that they're introducing as new forms of public art. You purchase artwork, and actually they give it to everybody in the world. So actually it's an entirely new way to look at ownership. So it's not just the visual aspects of what's being produced now, it's even the philosophical aspects, which is very Duchampian. Like, it's a philosophical question about what art is and who owns art. And that's really where we are now. So sort of my thoughts.
Can I chime in on that? Because I think Christy's raising some really important points, and I just kind of want to riff on a little bit, because it's I think one of the kind of theses that we've been playing around with is this idea that there's a new chapter of art history, kind of waiting to be told, which is, for lack of a better terminology, like digital art, but digital art separate and distinct from, kind of previous iterations of digital art, which are also meaningful, like new media, or like the Bill Violas, and the kind of more recent, like Ian Chang's and, Rachel Rose's and such, fine artists who practice in the digital realm. But like, there's a new, kind of cadre of practitioners, artists, who are, not crypto native, but like digital native, but outside the context of fine art, which I think is partially like facilitated by the NFT and crypto boom. What's actually made art fun and exciting for like the first time in 5 to 10 years. Like, there's this new energy, which it's caused by the tension of these outsiders. Like, it's the equivalent of someone walking on the field in the Super Bowl being like, "Put me in, coach." That's people, and it's crazy because he scored a touchdown. He scored the game-winning touchdown. And this is it's shaken up the art world. And I think that it's caused like a reckoning at the very, very deepest level of what is art and who gets to make it. And I think that in every kind of level of crypto, we see incumbents and disruption. And I think this is what it looks like for the art world. It's shaking the very kind of pillars of like, whoa, like that guy can make art, but he's not an artist. He didn't go to art school. Like, I don't see him in any shows. Why is he the third most, kind of expensive living artist? And that's good, right? Because art is at its best when it gets kicked in the ass.
So Jehan, I'd agree with that we really brought or took down the barriers from the traditional art world. With that said, we only have five, maybe 7 minutes left. So let's go through a couple quick, more rapid fire questions. So agree the barrier to enter is much lower, and that's an individual like Beeple, whose art, by the way, is really amazing. I'm super impressed each time he comes to market with a new piece. But is this a bubble? Is this going to keep on going? Can Beeple's artwork continue to increase? And how do you value his, not just Beeple's, but how do you value NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, Beeple is here to stay. Like Beeple, make no mistake, like, Beeple's the next Banksy. It's hard to accept, but so is Banksy, and so is Basquiat. Like in every movement, like it's always hard to accept that this is like the new norm and the new leader. And for me, and to be fair, like I collaborate quite closely with Mike, and I'm really always impressed by the depth of his thinking as well as his humility in terms of how he thinks of himself and his willingness to learn, which I think is the mark of a true artist. His rigor, his practice, like absolutely, like I've done studio visits with him and some of the top curators in the world, and they all come away saying, "Yep, true artist," and that's great. Not that he needs the validation, but the thing is, there's important work here. And I think that, in the next couple of months, there will be some interesting, kind of things which, are evolving, which will really help to kind of cement his place and, his development in kind of art history. I mean, I just feel like he's on the right track. And it's not just about Mike, right? It's also like Rafiq Anadol, Ash Thorpe, Andre Reisinger, and, many, many others. There's so many great artists out there who actually, who aren't part of like the fine art club. And that's good. Like that's a badge of honor, I think, in this movement. And not all of them are good and not all of them are bad. And, we'll see who really stands the test of time and who stands kind of criticism, who can stand that kind of critical interrogation. But it's important to kind of be open to it and not just, I was in a meeting with like a museum accession committee talking about NFTs. And it was really shocking, like how early, I would say, a lot of these, kind of collectors are, but they'll get there. So, but you got to keep an open mind to things that don't look like art that actually end up being quite important art.
David, are we in a bubble, and how do we value these NFTs?
Well, we are in a bubble, I can tell you that much, but we're always in a bubble in every market and asset class. Sometimes the bubble is inflated, sometimes it's deflated. But I can tell you we're in a bubble because, let's say, I don't know, as I wear many different hats and constantly switching gears and perspectives from all the different things I'm working on. And so when I get pitched and in conversations from all the people reaching out to me about what to buy in the crypto space and, from companies that are raising capital, I'd say at this point, probably about 70 to 80% of companies that come and try to pitch me for investment have an NFT play or layer as part of their business. And so I spend a lot of time, I try to be very direct and honest and upfront and tell people, it comes from the heart of like, I want anybody who comes to me for capital or help with their business, I want to help them. I want them to succeed, or at least give them a little bit of guidance in whatever time frame I have with them to help them improve what they're trying to do. And almost all the time I'm telling them to strip out what their NFT layer. And it's partly because they think by adding an NFT to what they're doing, it's going to all of a sudden create value that didn't exist before. That's one of the fundamental problems with a lot of the entrepreneurs who are now getting into the NFT space. And so what I really try to do is, I want to be a sobering voice there, but also helpful and help people see the cultural significance, importance, really understand like as Jehan had mentioned, what goes into some of these, artists having what it takes to actually be doing important things within the NFT space from an art perspective, but also, if now separately, when a lot of these companies are adding NFT layers, if it has something that has a purpose that isn't about creating something of value, I think there's a lot of NFTs that can happen or that can be issued that don't have to have a value. For example, right, like something around conferences, memberships, being part of an event from a historical significance, just to show and share that you were part of something, right? Sometimes I bring up the example to people, all right, if we were attending this conference in person, and if we were able to look around the room and had, some version of augmented reality where we could see, and there were a number of people that were issued, and I told you that 30 people in the audience were Uber investors, right? That doesn't tell you much. If I told you that 6 of them were investors in the seed round and 4 in the Series A, and the other 20 were owners just in the public markets, that tells you something different about, as kind of that badge presenting participant in an early round. It doesn't tell you what they made on it. It doesn't tell you when they sold, but it tells you that something about their access to different investments and their experience investing at different stages. So that if we look around, we understand, okay, they invested in the first round, or even participating. As Jehan had mentioned, he spoke in 2018 in an event, and we both spoke at different events. Christy, I'm sure as well over the years, right? To know that we were at the same place at the same time, there are certain cultural markers or things that can help us bond or connect deeper together and with newer people that we meet based on holding certain NFTs for things we do. University degrees could be NFTs that don't have to have a value associated with it, right? I've been also coming up with, I like thinking and coming up with new metaphors and helping explain things. I'd be willing to bet today that, and this has happened a number of times, that out of the Fortune 100 or 1,000 companies globally, and you go around to the biggest companies, that there's still some percentage of people, 5%, 10%, that are lying about their credentials, where they went to university. And so the more we can have stuff like NFTs clean up that and represent different things, I think that'll kind of lead towards some of the promises of what NFTs can do for us in all aspects of our lives. But to go back to the valuation question, I guess my answer there, to be clear, is a lot of NFTs don't have to have value, right? And some NFTs, as we get into, so like some of the things we've all discussed, based on certain attributes, aspects, the work that goes into it, the reputation, the experience that's built over time in the art form, will develop or will actually have significant value, and that'll grow over time too as more people understand and appreciate it.
I think an interesting way to bring fundamentals to NFTs that I'm kind of excited about is when a creator or when a collector has an NFT from a creator, they become cryptographically connected to that creator. So the creator can forever send them fungible and non-fungible value directly to their wallet. So I like the idea of creators, whether it's artists or musicians or athletes or anyone, being able to send NFTs or send value in the form of NFT, fungible or non-fungible coins to their early supporters or to their late supporters or just to their high value supporters. So for example, a musician is going on tour, they can send VIP tickets to their high value collectors when they're in New York or when they're in Chicago or Singapore or Dubai or Sydney or wherever. And if the collector's actually in Hong Kong, is not in New York or Chicago or Singapore, then those tickets have value. They can resell to someone in New York or Chicago or Miami or Toronto or London or whatever city. David, in sentence, where do you guys see NFTs in 5 years?
In one sentence?
One sentence.
Transparent marketplace with abundant investment tools with a robust creator community.
Awesome. David, what do you think?
I think cryptocurrencies can be used for everything we do today with money, and NFTs can and will be used for everything else. So any form of digital representation of digital assets and physical assets that we own.
Jehan, one sentence.
NFTs will be invisible, omnipresent, all-powerful, and will meaningfully, exponentially kind of increase the utility of the physical world into the metaverse and vice versa.
Awesome. Jehan, David, Christy, I appreciate the time. Great conversation. And we are now going to talk about brands making an impact through NFTs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Cheers, everyone.